Design biblical signs. God is transforming how you respond to life. There are moments in life when change does not begin around you but within you. Situations may look similar, challenges may still arise, and uncertainty may still appear. Yet your response begins to feel different. What once unsettled you now feels manageable. What once triggered reaction now invites reflection. This is not coincidence, it is transformation. Many expect growth to be visible through external change, yet one of the deepest transformations occurs in how you respond to life itself. God often works beneath what is seen, reshaping reactions, strengthening awareness, and forming a steadier inner life. Instead of changing every circumstance, He begins by changing the way the heart responds to them. This process is subtle, gradual, and deeply formative. You may notice quiet shifts within yourself. Reactions slow, impulses soften, reflection increases. Emotional waves still rise, yet they no longer carry you in the same way. What once produced unrest now produces awareness. This is not emotional distance, it is inner strengthening. Transformation begins when response becomes conscious rather than automatic. Scripture often reflects this pattern of inward renewal. Those who grew spiritually were not always removed from difficulty, but they were transformed within it. Their strength was revealed in how they responded, not only in what they faced. God forms maturity by reshaping reaction into reflection, fear into steadiness, and impulse into clarity. When response changes, life itself begins to feel different. Today, we will explore 9 biblical signs that reveal when God is transforming how you respond to life. These signs may be quiet, yet they reveal a deep inner formation taking place within you, strengthening your awareness, stability, and ability to move through life with greater steadiness and clarity. The first sign that God is transforming how you respond to life appears when your reactions begin to slow. There was a time when situations triggered immediate emotional responses. Words, pressure, uncertainty, or unexpected change could quickly produce reaction before reflection. You felt first, responded quickly, and only later understood what had happened within you. But gradually, something begins to shift. The space between what happens and how you respond starts to widen. You still feel, yet you no longer react as instantly as before. This change may seem subtle, but it reflects deep transformation. God often reshapes response by increasing awareness. Instead of being carried by automatic reaction, you begin to pause, even briefly, before responding. This pause creates space for clarity. It allows you to observe rather than be overtaken. Emotional movement still exists, yet it no longer governs you in the same way. Reaction becomes response, and response becomes conscious rather than automatic. There was a season in my own life when I reacted quickly to what I felt. If something unsettled me, I responded immediately. If uncertainty appeared, tension rose quickly. I often did not realize how much my reactions were shaping my inner life. But over time, something began to change. I noticed moments where I could pause instead of reacting. At first, the pause was small, almost invisible, yet it changed everything. That space allowed understanding to grow before reaction took over. Looking back, I see that God was not changing my circumstances first. He was transforming how I responded to them. Scripture often reflects this transformation through the idea of being slow to react and steady in heart. Those who matured spiritually did not stop feeling, but they learned to respond with awareness rather than impulse. Their strength was not emotional suppression, but conscious steadiness. Transformation begins when reaction becomes guided rather than automatic. From a psychological perspective, this shift reflects growing self-awareness and emotional regulation. The mind becomes less reactive and more observant. Instead of being controlled by immediate emotion, you begin to process before responding. This strengthens stability because your responses become intentional rather than impulsive. Over time, this awareness reshapes how you experience life itself. You may notice subtle signs of this transformation. You pause more often before reacting. Emotional waves still arise, yet they do not carry you as before. You feel less controlled by immediate reaction and more guided by inner awareness. This is not hesitation, it is formation. God is transforming how you respond by teaching your heart to move with awareness rather than impulse. As this pause becomes more natural, another quiet transformation begins to unfold. Emotional intensity that once dominated your reactions begins to soften, and your inner life becomes less driven by immediate emotional movement. This leads to the next sign, where God begins to transform emotional intensity into emotional clarity. Another sign that God is transforming how you respond to life appears when emotional intensity begins to soften and give way to emotional clarity. There was a time when strong emotions quickly shaped your responses. When something felt overwhelming, your reaction followed the intensity of the feeling. Joy elevated you, frustration unsettled you, uncertainty tightened your thoughts, and pressure often amplified your response. Emotions moved strongly, and your reactions often followed their movement. But gradually, something within you begins to change. Emotions still arise, yet they no longer dominate your response in the same way. Intensity softens, and clarity begins to grow. This transformation does not remove emotion, it reshapes its influence. God often transforms response by bringing balance where intensity once ruled. You still feel deeply, yet you are less driven by emotional waves. Instead of reacting from intensity alone, you begin to respond from awareness. Emotions become signals rather than drivers. This shift creates stability because response is no longer controlled solely by what is felt in the moment. There was a time in my own life when emotional intensity often shaped how I responded. When I felt overwhelmed, my reactions reflected that weight. I did not always realize how strongly emotion influenced my direction. But slowly, something began to change. I noticed that even when emotions rose, I could remain clearer. The feeling did not disappear, but it no longer controlled my response. That quiet shift helped me understand that transformation was happening beneath what I could see. Scripture often reflects this movement from emotional dominance to inner steadiness. Those who matured spiritually did not become emotionless. They became grounded. Their responses reflected clarity rather than emotional turbulence. Transformation occurs when emotion remains present but no longer governs direction. Emotional clarity replaces emotional impulse, and response becomes steadier. From a psychological perspective, this shift reflects growing emotional regulation and cognitive balance. Instead of reacting based on immediate emotional intensity, the mind begins to process feeling more consciously. This reduces impulsive responses and strengthens intentional behavior. Emotional awareness grows, and clarity begins to guide response more than intensity. This strengthens resilience and steadiness within daily life. You may notice subtle signs of this transformation. Strong emotions arise, yet you remain clearer. You feel deeply, yet you respond with greater balance. Emotional waves pass without fully determining your reaction. This is not suppression, it is formation. God is transforming how you respond by turning emotional intensity into emotional clarity, shaping steadiness within your inner life. As emotional clarity deepens, another quiet transformation begins to unfold. Situations that once triggered strong reactions begin to lose their power, and your inner life becomes less controlled by familiar emotional patterns. This leads to the next sign, where God begins to transform old reaction patterns into conscious response. Another sign that God is transforming how you respond to life appears when old reaction patterns begin to lose their power over you. There was a time when certain situations triggered predictable responses. Familiar pressures, repeated disappointments, or specific emotional memories could quickly produce the same reaction again and again. You may not have fully understood why, yet the response felt automatic. But gradually, something begins to change. The same situations may still appear, yet your reaction is no longer identical. Awareness begins to interrupt what was once automatic. This transformation reflects deep inner renewal. God often reshapes response by weakening the hold of old patterns. When awareness grows, reaction becomes less mechanical and more conscious. You begin to recognize emotional habits rather than be governed by them. Instead of repeating the same response, you pause, observe, and respond differently. This shift marks the beginning of real transformation, where the past loses its automatic influence over the present. There was a season in my own life when certain situations always produced the same reaction. I felt caught in familiar emotional cycles, repeating responses I did not always intend. I often wondered why I reacted the same way, even when I wanted to change. But over time, something began to shift. I noticed moments where I could observe my reaction before it fully formed. That awareness created space for a different response. It was gradual, yet meaningful. Looking back, I understand that God was reshaping how I responded, not by removing challenges, but by changing my inner patterns. Scripture often reflects this movement from repetition to renewal. Those who grew spiritually did not remain trapped in old responses. They experienced inner renewal that allowed new responses to emerge. Transformation occurs when the heart becomes aware enough to respond consciously rather than automatically. Old patterns weaken as new steadiness forms. From a psychological perspective, this shift reflects pattern interruption and cognitive awareness. Automatic reactions are often shaped by repeated emotional experiences. When awareness increases, these patterns begin to loosen. The mind becomes capable of choosing response rather than repeating habit. This strengthens resilience because reaction becomes guided by awareness rather than conditioned response. You may notice subtle signs of this transformation. Situations that once triggered automatic reactions now feel different. You observe your response more clearly. You feel less controlled by familiar emotional cycles. This is not sudden change, it is formation. God is transforming how you respond by weakening old patterns and strengthening conscious awareness within you. As these old patterns continue to loosen, another quiet transformation begins to unfold. Emotional disturbances that once unsettled you quickly begin to lose their intensity, and your inner life becomes less reactive to temporary pressures. This leads to the next sign, where God begins to transform emotional disturbance into emotional steadiness. Another sign that God is transforming how you respond to life appears when emotional disturbances begin to lose their intensity and your inner life becomes less reactive to temporary pressures. There was a time when unexpected situations, criticism, stress, or uncertainty could quickly unsettle you. Emotional waves rose strongly, and your response often reflected that intensity. You may have felt shaken for long periods, carrying the emotional weight even after the moment had passed. But gradually, something begins to change. Disturbances may still arise, yet they no longer dominate your inner life in the same way. Their intensity softens, and your steadiness begins to grow. This transformation reflects emotional strengthening. God often reshapes response by forming stability beneath emotional movement. Instead of reacting with prolonged unrest, you begin to regain balance more quickly. Emotional waves still appear, yet they do not carry you as before. You remain present even in pressure. This does not mean difficulty disappears. It means your response becomes steadier within it. Emotional disturbance begins to give way to emotional steadiness. There was a time in my own life when emotional disturbances unsettled me deeply. Stress or uncertainty could remain within me long after the situation had passed. I often felt overwhelmed by what I experienced internally. But over time, something subtle began to change. I noticed that even when emotional waves rose, they passed more quickly. I regained clarity sooner. The disturbance did not disappear, but it no longer controlled me in the same way. That quiet shift revealed that transformation was taking place within me. Scripture often reflects this movement towards steadiness of heart. Those who matured spiritually were not free from disturbance, but they were not ruled by it. Their inner life remained grounded even in pressure. Transformation occurs when emotional disturbance no longer determines response. Steadiness grows beneath emotional movement, creating deeper resilience. From a psychological perspective, this shift reflects emotional recovery and nervous system regulation. When resilience strengthens, emotional disturbances lose their lasting impact. Instead of remaining unsettled, the mind returns to balance more naturally. This strengthens stability because emotional waves no longer define the inner state. Recovery becomes quicker and steadiness becomes more consistent. You may notice subtle signs of this transformation. Emotional disturbances still occur, yet their intensity feels reduced. You regain balance more quickly. Your inner life feels less reactive to temporary pressures. This is not detachment, it is strengthening. God is transforming how you respond by turning emotional disturbance into emotional steadiness, forming deeper stability within you. As this steadiness deepens, another quiet transformation begins to unfold. Your responses begin to reflect greater patience rather than urgency, and your inner life becomes less driven by immediate reaction. This leads to the next sign, where God begins to transform urgency into patient and intentional response. Another sign that God is transforming how you respond to life appears when urgency begins to soften and patience starts to shape your responses. There was a time when you felt pressure to react quickly. When situations demanded attention, your response often followed the urgency of the moment. You felt the need to resolve, respond, or decide immediately, believing speed would bring clarity or control. Yet this urgency often created inner tension, but gradually something begins to change. You still respond, yet you no longer feel driven by immediate pressure. A quieter patience begins to guide how you move. This transformation reflects deep inner formation. God often reshapes response by replacing urgency with steadiness. Instead of reacting quickly, you begin to allow space for reflection. Patience does not slow you unnecessarily, it strengthens clarity. When urgency softens, response becomes more intentional. You begin to notice that clarity often emerges not in haste, but in steadiness. This shift reflects growing inner balance and trust. There was a season in my own life when urgency shaped many of my responses. I felt pressure to resolve uncertainty quickly, to react before fully understanding, and to move before feeling grounded. Yet this constant urgency created quiet unrest within me. Over time, something began to change. I noticed moments where I could pause without feeling pressure. I began to respond more slowly, yet more clearly. That quiet shift helped me understand that transformation was not about reacting faster, but about responding more consciously. Scripture often reflects this pattern of patient steadiness. Those who matured spiritually were not driven by haste, but guided by clarity. Their strength was not speed, but grounded response. Transformation occurs when patience replaces urgency, allowing the heart to respond with awareness rather than pressure. Patience strengthens response because it creates space for clarity to emerge. From a psychological perspective, this shift reflects improved impulse control and cognitive regulation. When urgency decreases, the mind becomes less reactive and more reflective. Decisions become less driven by immediate emotion and more guided by understanding. This strengthens resilience because response becomes intentional rather than impulsive. Patience allows awareness to guide action. You may notice subtle signs of this transformation. You feel less pressure to react immediately. You allow time for reflection before responding. Your responses feel calmer and more intentional. This is not hesitation, it is formation. God is transforming how you respond by replacing urgency with patient steadiness, shaping clarity within your inner life. As this patience deepens, another quiet transformation begins to unfold. Fear that once shaped your responses begins to lose its influence, and your inner life becomes less controlled by imagined outcomes. This leads to the next sign, where God begins to transform fear-based reaction into grounded and confident response. Another sign that God is transforming how you respond to life appears when fear begins to lose its influence over your reactions. There was a time when uncertainty, imagined outcomes, or past experiences shaped how you responded. Fear often appeared quietly, guiding hesitation, shaping decisions, and influencing emotional reactions without always being visible. You may have reacted cautiously, avoided certain paths, or felt unsettled simply because the outcome was unknown. But gradually, something begins to change. Fear may still arise, yet it no longer governs your response in the same way. A quieter confidence begins to take its place. This transformation reflects deeper inner strengthening. God often reshapes response by reducing the power of fear rather than removing uncertainty itself. When fear weakens, your reactions become less defensive and more grounded. You begin to respond from steadiness rather than from imagined threat. This does not remove caution, but it replaces fear-driven reaction with awareness-guided response. Confidence grows not from knowing everything, but from becoming internally steadier. There was a time in my own life when fear subtly shaped how I responded. Uncertainty about the future created hesitation within me. I often imagined what could go wrong, and that imagined fear influenced my reactions more than I realized. But over time, something quietly shifted. I noticed that fear no longer controlled my response as before. I could feel uncertainty without being ruled by it. That quiet change helped me understand that transformation was happening within me, not by removing uncertainty, but by strengthening my inner ground. Scripture often reflects this movement from fear to steadiness. Those who matured spiritually still faced uncertainty, yet their responses were not shaped by fear alone. Their strength came from inner grounding rather than external certainty. Transformation occurs when fear loses its control and steadiness begins to guide response. This shift strengthens resilience because reaction becomes less defensive and more intentional. From a psychological perspective, this transformation reflects emotional resilience and cognitive balance. When fear weakens, the mind becomes less reactive and more stable. Instead of anticipating danger, the inner life begins to remain grounded. This reduces anxiety and strengthens endurance, allowing responses to be guided by awareness rather than by imagined threat. You may notice subtle signs of this transformation. Situations that once triggered fear-based reactions now feel different. You remain calmer even when uncertainty is present. Fear may arise, yet it does not control your response. This is not indifference, it is strengthening. God is transforming how you respond by weakening fear and forming grounded confidence within your inner life. As this confidence deepens, another quiet transformation begins to unfold. Your responses begin to reflect greater compassion and understanding rather than defensiveness, and your inner life becomes less reactive toward others. This leads to the next sign, where God begins to transform defensive reaction into compassionate and grounded response. Another sign that God is transforming how you respond to life appears when your reactions toward others begin to shift from defensiveness to understanding. There was a time when certain words, attitudes, or actions from others could quickly trigger reaction within you. You may have felt misunderstood, criticized, or emotionally affected, and your response often reflected protection rather than clarity. Defensiveness felt natural because it guarded what felt vulnerable. But gradually, something begins to change. The same situations may still occur, yet your response becomes less defensive and more aware. You begin to see more than just the surface. This transformation reflects deep inner maturity. God often reshapes response by expanding perception. Instead of reacting immediately to what is said or done, you begin to perceive the deeper context behind it. You recognize emotion in others, tension beneath words, and human fragility behind behavior. This awareness softens defensiveness and allows understanding to grow. You still protect your boundaries, yet you respond with steadiness rather than emotional reaction. There was a season in my own life when I often reacted defensively without fully realizing it. Certain words unsettled me, and I responded quickly, believing I needed to protect myself. But over time, something began to change. I noticed moments where I could listen before reacting. I began to see that not every action against me was intentional harm. That shift allowed me to respond with more clarity and less tension. Looking back, I understand that transformation was taking place within how I responded to others. Scripture often reflects this movement toward compassion and understanding. Those who matured spiritually learned to respond with patience rather than reaction. Their strength was not in defending themselves quickly, but in responding with clarity and steadiness. Transformation occurs when defensiveness softens and understanding grows. Response becomes less reactive and more grounded in awareness. From a psychological perspective, this transformation reflects emotional intelligence and perspective expansion. When defensiveness decreases, the mind becomes more capable of interpreting situations without immediate emotional reaction. This strengthens relational stability and reduces unnecessary conflict. Responses become more thoughtful, balanced, and intentional. You may notice subtle signs of this transformation. You react less defensively. You listen more before responding. You perceive context rather than reacting only to surface. This is not weakness, it is strengthening. God is transforming how you respond by turning defensiveness into understanding, shaping steadiness within your relationships and inner life. As this understanding deepens, another quiet transformation begins to unfold. Your responses begin to reflect greater inner calm, even in complex situations, and your inner life becomes less disturbed by external tension. This leads to the next sign, where God begins to transform reaction into deep inner calm and stable presence. Another sign that God is transforming how you respond to life appears when a deeper inner calm begins to remain within you, even in complex or tense situations. There was a time when external pressure easily disturbed your inner state. Conflict, uncertainty, unexpected change, or emotional tension could quickly create unrest within you. You may have felt overwhelmed, unsettled, or internally shaken when situations became difficult. But gradually, something begins to change. The same situations may still arise, yet your inner life remains calmer. Emotional waves still move, but they no longer carry you as before. This transformation reflects inner strengthening at a deep level. God often reshapes response by forming calm beneath emotional movement. Instead of reacting to external tension, you begin to remain present within it. Calm does not mean the absence of feeling, it means steadiness within feeling. You still experience complexity, yet you are less shaken by it. This deeper calm allows your response to remain grounded rather than reactive. There was a season in my own life when external tension easily unsettled me. Difficult conversations, uncertainty, or emotional pressure could remain within me long after the situation had passed. I often felt internally restless, searching for relief. But over time, something subtle began to change. I noticed that even when tension appeared, I could remain calmer than before. I was not free from difficulty, but I was less shaken by it. That quiet shift revealed that transformation was happening within how I responded to life. Scripture often reflects this inner calm as a sign of maturity and grounding. Those who grew spiritually did not escape difficulty, but they carried steadiness within it. Their calm was not emotional absence, but inner strength. Transformation occurs when calm begins to remain even in tension, allowing response to be guided by clarity rather than disturbance. From a psychological perspective, this shift reflects emotional regulation and nervous system balance. When inner calm strengthens, the mind becomes less reactive to stress. Emotional waves still arise, yet recovery is faster and stability is maintained. This strengthens resilience and allows presence rather than reaction to guide behavior. You may notice subtle signs of this transformation. You remain calmer in situations that once unsettled you. Emotional tension passes more quickly. Your inner life feels steadier even in complexity. This is not detachment, it is strengthening. God is transforming how you respond by forming calm beneath emotional movement, shaping a stable presence within you. As this calm deepens, the final transformation begins to unfold. Your responses begin to reflect conscious intention rather than unconscious reaction, and your inner life becomes guided more by awareness than by impulse. This leads to the final sign, where God reveals the deepest transformation within how you respond to life. The final sign that God is transforming how you respond to life appears when your responses become guided more by conscious intention than by unconscious reaction. There was a time when many of your responses emerged automatically. Situations happened, emotions rose, and reactions followed without full awareness. You lived, felt, and responded, yet often without realizing how deeply your inner patterns were shaping your direction. But gradually, something within you has changed. You begin to respond with awareness. You pause, observe, and choose rather than simply react. This is the deepest level of transformation, where response becomes intentional rather than automatic. This transformation reflects profound inner formation. God often works quietly beneath visible life, reshaping not only what you feel, but how you respond to what you feel. Instead of being carried by impulse, you begin to act from awareness. Instead of reacting to life, you begin to engage with it consciously. This does not remove emotion, uncertainty, or difficulty. It changes how you move within them. You become less reactive and more present. This is the formation of inner maturity. There was a season in my own life when I reacted to life more than I understood it. I was still trying to find my direction, often confused about what I truly wanted and unsure about where I was going. At times I felt lost, emotionally fragile, and uncertain about my place in life. There were moments when even small pressures unsettled me deeply. But over time, through reflection, prayer, and quiet endurance, something began to change. I did not suddenly gain all the answers, but I began to respond differently. I became steadier, more aware, less driven by immediate reaction. I am still walking through this process of emotional and spiritual growth, yet I can see how far I have come. Looking back, I understand that God was not first changing my circumstances. He was transforming how I responded to them. That quiet transformation continues, and I walk this path together with those who are listening. Scripture often reflects this deepest form of renewal, where transformation occurs not only in belief, but in response. Those who matured spiritually did not simply feel differently, they responded differently. Their strength was revealed in how they lived, how they endured, and how they remained steady even in difficulty. Transformation becomes visible when response reflects awareness rather than impulse. From a psychological perspective, this shift reflects full integration of awareness, emotional regulation, and intentional behavior. The mind becomes less reactive and more conscious. Instead of repeating automatic patterns, you respond with clarity and presence. This strengthens resilience because your inner life becomes guided rather than driven. Stability becomes part of your being rather than something you seek. You may notice subtle signs of this transformation. You pause before reacting. You respond with awareness rather than impulse. You feel steadier within uncertainty. This is not sudden change. It is formation. God has been transforming how you respond to life, shaping clarity, steadiness, and conscious presence within you. What you have been experiencing is not random. It is quiet transformation. God often changes how you respond before changing what you face. When response changes, life itself begins to feel different. If you recognize these signs within yourself, then something real has already begun. This message reflects my personal understanding of Scripture, shaped through life, reflection, struggle, and faith. Like many, I am still learning, still growing, still walking this journey. My hope is that this message brings clarity, peace, and deeper awareness to your inner life, helping you see that transformation is already unfolding within you. If this message spoke to you, take a moment to respond. Write in the comments what you learned, or share a simple declaration such as, "I choose to respond with awareness and steadiness." Your words may encourage someone walking through the same quiet transformation.